Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Max Warframe, where we take weapons, we put a bunch of armor on them and try and make them as usable as possible. Today's episode is actually a subscriber request for the 10-0 burst rifle, the Tiberon. Now I've had a few people message me in the last couple of days or so asking about builds for this weapon, so I felt that I really should update the Let's Mod video I did a long time ago, and I'll link it in the description below. So, the Tiberon. There isn't a huge amount to talk about here, with a base damage of 60, making it the second highest damage of the burst fire weapons, just behind the Cerberus, with the majority 30 coming in the form of puncture, 15 as impact, and 15 as slash. It also comes with a pretty decent magazine size of 30 rounds, meaning that you get 10 bursts with this before needing to reload. In addition to that, the accuracy is pretty damn good, meaning that the landing of follow-up shots is pretty easy. However, the Tiberon does have a few limiting factors. The negligible status chance at 2.5%, the critical chance at 5%, which is also negligible. They're not even close to being worth modding for. It really limits the effectiveness of the Tiberon for those higher levels, and the reload time at 2.3 seconds isn't exactly what you'd call quick either. There are other issues that affect burst fire weapons that apply here, such as the burst fire, meaning you're likely to have wasted shots. Especially if an enemy needs maybe just one more round to kill him, you're going to have to hit him with an entire burst of 3 every single time, which makes this technically less efficient than a weapon that you can actually personally control the fire rate. Manufacture costs are also fairly high, with it requiring not only 650 blasted, 600 rubido, but also a fully built former and a fully built latron to go with it. It's definitely not the most expensive weapon out there for sure, but it is something that is still going to require a bit of work for a newer player to be able to build it. Okay, so let's move on to starting to mod the Tiberon. Now it does come with a V polarity as standard, however we're going to add 6 former, which is going to be another 3 Vs, 3 dashes. Now we're going to have a few mods that are going to remain the same between the 3 of our builds. Serration for damage, split chamber for multi-shot, heavy caliber, which I will talk a little bit about later. And we've also got shred on here. Now the fire rate doesn't really do a huge amount with the Tiberon, but that punch through really does. I mean, you could always form this instead of for a V, you could always put a dash on there for metal auger, but I really like going with the shred, and that feels more than enough for me. Now, in terms of our elemental builds, we're going to be focusing very much on the elemental since there's no crit and no status. So for the Grineer, we're going to go for a radiation viral build, so we're going to go cryo rounds, infected clip for the viral, hellfire and stormbringer for the radiation. Now against the corpus and in the void, we're going to do something slightly different. So we're going to go with a 3 elemental build here, so cryo rounds and stormbringer for magnetic, infected clip for the toxin damage, and we're going to go with primed fast hands to bring the reload down from that 2.3 down to the 1.5. Now once again, this is personal preference. You could actually switch this out for one of the V polarity elemental mods if you wish to. However, I really think that this actually makes the Tiberon much nicer to use, and it's one of those mods that's definitely going to be personal preference. And then again, the same with the voids. We've got Stormbringer, infected clip for corrosive, and hellfire for heat. And if you're running the corrosive projection, you just change out cryo rounds in there for Stormbringer. And then you've got viral and heat for if you're running corrosive projection in the void. Like I say, prime fast hands, I really like it on there. It's worth giving it a shot. If you don't really like it, then obviously that dash polarity is going to be useful for your elemental combos anyway, since it fits immediately in with the Grineer build here. So, like I say, very much that personal preference. So in terms of whether this weapon is worth the time, effort and resources to max and to build, and I think it is worth it. Look, despite the fact it's definitely a mid-tier weapon for sure, doesn't even close to challenging the mighty Cerberus, it's kind of a fun weapon to use, and I do enjoy it. It sounds cool, it looks cool, the reloads are pretty damn cool too, and it plays really nicely. It feels like a very solid primary weapon for low to mid-tier missions, but it is going to start to struggle when you try to take it that little bit higher. The main problem is the lack of any real crit chance or even status chance to give it that little bit of boost at those higher levels. To be honest, I really can't think of much bad to say about the Tiberon. I quite like it, despite its drawbacks, and I'd happily derp around with it in a lot of missions when I'm just playing for a little bit of fun. In terms of the modding of the Tiberon and what I could have done a little bit differently, there really isn't a whole lot I think really could be changed. You can't mod this for status or for crit, so those ideas are out. The physical damage types, impact / puncture mods, they're not even close to being worth it on this. Steer clear of those mods, at least on the Tiberon, as the stats are just nowhere even close enough for these mods to be considered. Now, heavy caliber is one of those mods that is debatable. The damage buff is definitely needed on this, but it does reduce the effective range of the Tiberon quite a bit. So on those longer range missions, it might be better to have an accurate secondary, or switch out the heavy caliber for maybe another elemental, or a Bane mod, depending on who you are fighting. I tend to go with heavy caliber at all times, and the reason for that is the lack of crit, the lack of status. It really is a straight up elemental weapon, with nothing else on the side. So buffing the elemental damage as much as possible for those close to medium range engagements, and then using something like the X Prime over range, is something that I like doing very much with this. Now, the main problem that the Tiberon has is its competition. It's up against some really strong competitors in the Cerberus and the Burst on Prime, and while it definitely performs well, I find that the other two burst weapons are more fun to use. The Tiberon itself is a fun weapon to play with, that is for sure, but for me it doesn't replace the Cerberus or the Burst on Prime, even if I do play with the Tiberon quite a bit still. So the Tiberon, decent damage, it's a pretty good weapon and it's pretty good fun to play. It's not a top tier weapon, in fact not even close, but it is a decent weapon when used right. It will drop off fairly quick at those higher levels however. As always guys, many thanks for watching, please remember to leave a like and subscribe, it helps me out a ton, and I shall see you in the next episode.